Hi, I'm Natasha Josie, and this is the Being Body Podcast, brought to you by House Ltd. This podcast pulsates amongst creatives and thinkers who are seeking inspiration and purpose in life and are willing to engage and listen, who are perceptive, reflective, sensitive, and critical. We believe that sharing experiences has a unique way to make sense of human suffering, and it is through sharing that we heal, connect, and create. Today's conversation is with Ahsen Waheed, who is an architect and a multidisciplinary artist. He's also the co-founder of Din Dhale, which is a monthly gathering in public parks for open mics, pop-up galleries, and art therapy over board games and street food. Hence, to utilize more productivity and creativity in the way public spaces are utilized. Today's conversation is led by my co-host Nayab Naveed, who is a writer and poet and looks at the world with a keen eye. I'll let Nayab take over and fill you in on our guest today.
So, Ahsen, my first question to you would be, what do you do?
I have a lot of hats that I keep on changing.
Yeah.
I just graduated as an architect,
Mhm.
so that's something to flaunt. And other than being indulged in architecture and construction off and on, and also being indulged as a designer. Two, three things that are very constant in my life are painting and writing. So I have been very seriously cultivating my art practice for the past 1 year. I used to draw and paint since I was in 8th grade, but it's only up until last year that I actually started to take it very seriously and started to cultivate an art practice. And I feel like a lot of people don't really um, they they don't ever cultivate their practices, and I feel like that's a very different thing than just doing art, or just doing anything for that matter, because you really need to cultivate an environment and cultivate a mindset in order to approach it. And other than that, of course, I write. I have been writing poetry for a long time, and these days I am working on putting together a collection of poetry and publishing it. I hope it comes out this year. Um, and these are the two things that usually mostly take up my time.
Right. And it makes me wonder, what compels you to, do all these different things? What's your driving force?
I really have asked this question quite a number of times for myself as well, and now it feels like it has become redundant. I think that I like to make things, and that's about it. I really don't want to, sort of indulge in as to why I do this. What's like? I feel like the only reason why I do it is because I want to make things, and I really like creating things, and the sense that I get at the end of it. And that's all. I mean, I have tried up with a lot of philosophical and existential responses to that question. But at the end of the day, I feel like it all boils down to the fact that that's just, I will not be comfortable doing anything else. And I'm really comfortable sort of exploring the possibilities that you get when you create something. Because really, you don't really know where you're going, and you don't really know what you're going to find out. And I feel like I really like that a lot.
And is this feeling of not knowing where you're going something that drives you in your life as well?
I maybe perhaps. The thing is that uh, that feeling of not knowing where you're going, that is a very uncomfortable state to be in, because usually we want to know where we're going, and we really like to compartmentalize things and set things in multiple boxes so that it's easier for our brains and also for us to navigate through. And I think that I feel like it's, for me, it's very important to get comfortable with that feeling of not knowing where you're going. And I think that the path that I'm currently taking in my life right now, I do not know where it's going to take me. But I know that wherever I'm going to end up, it's going to be interesting. Because I feel like that's just how things are. If you, and just like in art, like you figure things out as you go along, right? You don't exactly know at times what's the end result going to be. And that's something that I found very contrasting to architecture, because in architecture, you know exactly, you need to know your end product, your end result. There are multiple steps that you need to take in order to get there, and that at times can get a little constrictive. But in I think that this ability to make things up or figure things out as you go along, that's very interesting, and I feel like that's also very rewarding, if one applies it to their life.
Hmm. And do you remember the first time when you felt this feeling of not knowing where you're going?
I feel like I've always been very aware of this feeling of not knowing where I'm going. And it used to cause a lot of unwanted anxiety. But now I have very recently started to get started to tell myself that that's all right, because perhaps nobody knows where they're going, and everyone just tries to make things up as they go along. So yeah, because, and also I think it has got a lot to do with sort of how we make decisions in our lives, perhaps. At times, there are a lot of other people who are making your decisions for you. But then there comes a point where you have to start making decisions for yourself, and then you realize that, you know, um, you don't know where you're headed, and that can cause a lot of unwanted stress and anxiety. And then you sort of realize that nobody knows where they're going, and you just are going to figure things out as you go along, and hopefully those things are going to be interesting and those things are going to be worthwhile.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, there are times where you felt like, people were making decisions for you. Can you
Yeah.
mention a time where you felt like that?
I mean, I feel like, when you're growing up, your parents are going to make decisions for you, what to, what clothes to wear, what to eat, and when to eat it, and where to go get your education, what people to sit with, and what company to avoid. So I feel like that, we sort of are sheltered and and we are being cultivated by the decisions of other people. And then you sort of get into, you grow up, and then you realize that, well, now what? Now you have to start dictating your own life. And then it hits you that, oh, you can either take perhaps the that avenue where everything is set in stone for you, and that might be very comfortable and that might be very soothing. But I feel like if you have that, and I feel like that it requires a lot of courage to sort of go out. I'm talking about all of these Carl Jung-esque ideas. I'm sorry, but I feel like if you go into, if you sort of like follow those unknown territories, you require certain level of courage. Just like, you need like a certain level of courage in order to create art. I mean, if you put down your brushes, or if you put down ink to paper, you don't know if you are good enough for this idea. I mean, there are times when even I would think that, am I really good enough for this poem? Or am I really good enough for this metaphor that has come up to me, and it requires my skill so that it could be brought into the world? And there is a lot of self doubt, and there is a lot of that nagging feeling of not being good enough. And I feel like that you need to cultivate some level of courage, so sort of like pass through that,
Mhm.
and tell yourself that it's all right. And if an idea has presented itself to you, then it's up to you to sort of at least do something about it. If it's going to be good or bad, I feel like that's irrespective of the equation.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask, where do you find a home in? What do you find a home in?
I find a home in music. It's a very
Oh,
I don't know how to put it, but I feel like I'm of the opinion that if whatever is going in my life, emotionally, physically, or mentally, I think that listening to music will always triggers, they just trigger very familiar feelings,
hmm.
right? And whenever I need to, so because I feel like that's what a house or a home is, right?
Mhm.
For example, when you walk in your home after a vacation, that familiar smell of your room reminds you that you're back home, or the way that your bed sheets press against your feet and your head when you lie down, right?
Hmm.
Or the smell of books, your books in your room,
Hmm.
or the way that you know the smell of garlic engulfs the entire kitchen at daytime when something is being cooked. So it's I feel like it's about a familiar feeling that perhaps never changes. So I feel like for me, music is that whenever I listen to it, and I listen to music very meditatively, I try to indulge in it as an experience. And I truly think that it is a performance art of really high regard.
Hmm.
And if I'm listening to a concerto, or I'm listening to a recital on the sitar, I really indulge myself in it. There are no lights in my room. Everything is very silent, and I'm very attentively listening to what they're doing.
Hmm.
And and then the feelings that they evoke, they're very familiar. Those aha moments and those bravo moments in the musical recitals,
Hmm.
but they're very familiar. But every single time they come and they hit me, it it's fantastic. It's and it makes me for a little moment forget about whatever else is going on around me, and I can sort of find my anchor there.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question, or was I supposed to like mention a concrete box in which I found a home in?
No, no, no. I think this answers my question quite well, and then I have a follow up question.
Yeah.
Uh, when can you mention an experience when you first listened to music and you had this familiar feeling? What was the song? What was the place? What was going on in your life that time?
Hmm. Um. I There are a few moments where I can recall music having a lot of impact over me, but I think that the sort of like the first time that I can recall when it all happened was when I was 16 years old or 17. That really angsty phase that we've all
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
and I was listening to this sitar recital at it was a recording that was recorded at Carnegie Hall by Anushka Shankar, and she was playing an Indian classical raga and on the sitar. And it's like a 12-minute or a 16-minute recital. And I remember listening to it again and again, again and again, as I would walk at night in the streets because, of course, you're an angsty 17-year-old.
Mm.
And I feel like those repetitive movements of the sitar and of the plucking of the strings and the way that they were building rhythm really sort of spoke to me, to my perhaps inner angst. And it feels like whatever I am going through in my life, because of course, sometimes 17 to 19 you're very angsty, and I feel like from 19 till 21 you're very arrogant, and then from 21 till 25 you realize how impeccably miserable everything is around you. So I feel like for every single moment in my life, that that rhythm or that those movements resonate with whatever is going, and I can really, it feels like every time I listen to music, it is speaking to me, to my current condition. For example, if I listen to that same recording now, it perhaps might be reminiscent of my 16-year-old or 17-year-old self, but it is not going to speak to my angst anymore. Perhaps now it is going to speak to the questions that I ask myself lately,
Yeah.
or sort of like the troubles that I go through.
Yeah. What are the questions that you ask yourself lately?
That's a very difficult question. One of the questions that I have been asking, I feel like this year, since the beginning, has been one of a lot of introspection, and for me, struggling a lot with anxiety and certain mental health issues,
Mm.
and just really thinking as to what do I really believe in, and what what does it mean to be SN, or what does it mean to be myself? Am I supposed to restrict my hats? Should I just be wearing one hat, or
Mm.
can I wear multiple hats? And what will it imply about identity if I end up wearing multiple hats? You know,
Mm.
is an identity attached to what you do repeatedly, one singular thing that you keep on doing repeatedly,
Yeah.
or is identity perhaps something even bigger than that? Perhaps is it an all encompassing idea? So these are some of the questions that I've been asking myself, and an overarching theme that has been in general in my life is to just try to find interesting and um, beautiful things. Like, I mean, I know it's a very bastardized and generic term, the term beautiful, but
Mm.
I try to find wonder and interest in 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 my day to day life. I mean, I really enjoy. This sort of like conversation is going on a tangent, but I really enjoy sitting and just looking at the clouds pass by at night at the
Mm.
backdrop of the moonlight, because I feel like I feel like that's like the source material for a poet to see how, let's like sitting in a market one day and observing a man who has been laboring away in the heat of June for the past 12 hours, and now
Mm.
he's just has had the time to just sit down and have his evening tea, and you're just sitting across the street observing him and seeing how his hands are shaking and the amount of sweat that is on his wrist. I'm not just sitting there and judge people. There's this really interesting meme that some people do arts and crafts and
Mm.
some people judge. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's not what you do when you're. I'm not judging the other person. I'm just making an observation and sort of
Mm.
trying to indulge in that. So yeah, these are some of the questions and these are some of the overarching themes that I the thoughts that I surround myself with.
Right, right, right. And you mentioned the word anxiety a lot, in our conversation, and I was wondering if it's something that, and angst as well, and I was wondering if it's something that was played a huge role in your life.
I think perhaps in that time I was not aware of it, but now in retrospect, maybe it did. I think as far as anxiety is concerned, yes, because there is this huge burden that you somehow have to be really, really good and, try to excel at things, a very Slytherin, attribute.
Mm.
But I think that these days I'm trying really hard to question these beliefs and question um, my anxiety itself as to, is it really necessary to have so many questions? It is really necessary to have so many raging thoughts. And I feel like that angst and anxiety, they do play a part in the creative life. Not to romanticize the idea of a tortured artist, because um, I don't think that that sort of idea exists. But I think that anxieties is an angst. They're sort of part of a creative individual's life, because if you have the ability of novelty, and if you have the ability to create ideas really rapidly, if you're really fluid with your ideas, then that is how you can apply that in your creative practice. But then, when you are with your friends, or when you are just having a cup of tea at a cafe, or if you are just reading, or if you're just having a very intimate conversation with someone, um, those those thought patterns are going to influence everything else that you do in your life as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. It does.
Because I think that, if you have the fluidity to represent the birth of Jesus Christ, for example, in 12 different images, or if you have the ability to talk about the morning dew drop of a December of a mid December morning, in 14 verses, then you also have the ability to really think uh, very harshly about a particular situation. You can keep on creating multiple realities for a particular situation. For example, if you're going home and you're going back home from a party and you're really drunk, and you can start telling yourself that, oh, perhaps my parents are going to find out that I'm really drunk, right? And then you can construct like 14 or 15 ways as to how they're going to find that out,
Mm.
right? But then, and how do you do that? Why do you do that? Because you have that ability of novelty, you have that ability of fluidity to, like, create one idea over another and then start linking them together. So I think that it's very important to just be mindful of these things, that I am trying little by little every day to be mindful of, and to tell myself that perhaps
Mm.
these things, that is how it happens. And yeah, to answer your question, yes, angst and anxiety is um they are a part of a creative person's life, and I feel like they're much more nuanced than we are told, or what the pop culture or the media tells us.
Mm.
Because I feel like in my experience they were very nuanced, and they were very layers of it all.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, you were talking about, this thought pattern of creating different realities and it almost being a creative process. Do you think this was something that you exercised as a child as well?
Yes, because when somebody asks me about a question as to, what was sort of that first spark of creativity in your life, I remember that somebody telling me the story of Moses and the parting of the Nile, right?
Mm.
And it was so impactful to, I feel like, the 3-year old or the 4-year old me, that I remember going back and remember when I was going to bed, I imagined myself as Moses, and I imagined parting the Nile, and I imagined, sort of the entire episode that followed after it. And I feel like ever since that day, I have been telling stories to myself, because I did have a bit of a lonely childhood growing up. Hence, I have to keep on telling stories to myself to entertain myself. And I think that, yeah, and I feel like that also is the reason why I'm really fascinated with myths as a grown adult, and I really try to cultivate them in my creative practice.
Mm. I want to know, what kind of stories did you tell yourself as a lonely child?
There, most of the stories were heroic. Whatever you would um, you would read, or
Mm.
whatever interesting thing that you would hear. Sometimes I was a sailor,
Mm.
or sometimes I was at a pirate ship. Sometimes I would be riding a phoenix, and sometimes I would be a knight, and sometimes I would be a wizard. And I feel like most stories, and even as a child and in adolescence as well, whenever I used to hear stories and whenever I used to watch them on the screen, I have always resonated with the old wise character in the story. For
Mm.
example, I really resonated, or I really wanted to be Dumbledore, or I
Mm.
really wanted to be Gandalf, because I felt like that they, or Master Shifu for that matter,
Mm.
because I don't know why, I just wanted to be them, because I thought that they're so wise, and people flock around them because of their intelligence. And because I feel like, because as a lonely child, I thought that if I was intelligent, then perhaps people would start flocking around me as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I still don't know why those things resonated with me, or those characters really resonated with me. And I feel like unconsciously I have tried to cultivate those characters in one way or the other in my life as well. I really at times come off as like this wise old human being who talks about sitar and angst and and the creative process. But yeah, I think, yeah, those are the kind of stories that I used to tell myself. And also I remember creating these really small figurines out of paper, and assigning backstories and characters to them, and then just creating a small stage play out of them.
Mm.
And I feel like that's how I have just those ideas and those stories um, took me through my childhood, and perhaps have impacted my creative practice now as well.
Mm. Mm. That's quite interesting, about the figurines and giving them a backstory. Can you tell me, like, can you tell me one backstory that you would have given a figurine?
These days, actually, interestingly, a story has come back to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it was perhaps a story that I was telling in my adolescence, but very recently it has surfaced out of the crevices of my forgetfulness. And that is that there were these two figurines, and one of them was a ballet dancer
Mm-hmm.
who was part of a circus train. Very interestingly, I don't know why, but the ballet dancer was part of a circus train that was going around India in 1898. And the ballet dancer, um they're going the train comes into a village and to stay the night, and in that village, um at the night time, there is um a small concert of sorts happening at the temple. And in the temple, the ballet dancer sees an Indian classical dancer, and perhaps they both fall in love. And the ballet dancer sort of teaches how to do ballet, or how to do those those movements to the Indian classical dancer. And eventually down the road, what happens is that the train packs up and it leaves, and with it the ballet dancer also goes away.
Mm.
And I feel like that the last scene of the story would probably be the classical dancers dancing and trying really hard to get those movements, but the dancer cannot get those movements because he or she doesn't remember um, what she was taught anymore, or all she can do is like really bad ballet, or all he can do is really bad ballet. So perhaps now, now in retrospect, I feel like it was like a comment on colonialism, a very
Mm.
bad comment on colonialism. But I feel like that is, if perhaps I was telling the story when I was like 13 or 14.
Mm.
But yeah, that is that, and that's a story that has come back to me recently, and maybe I might write something about it along those lines.
Mm. Do you see yourself as one of those characters?
I think yes, I do, because growing up, I had a very strong connection to the Urdu language,
Mm.
and I took a lot of pride in it, and I took a lot of because um, I was reading a lot of classical poetry. I knew a lot of ghazals and poems by heart, and I used to recite them here and there in conversations as relatability. But when I sort of grew up, and when you go to college, and when you go to a university, you realize that you have to change your language now. You have to talk in a different language now, and when you talk into a different language, a lot of the Urdu l- language aesthetic has been forgotten by me, or some part of me, and that is sad. I feel really sad at times. I do feel like that classical dancer who you know consciously or unconsciously picked up a few steps from that ballet dancer.
Mm.
And yeah, maybe I feel like the stories that we tell are reflections of either our ideas or our lives,
Mm.
because you cannot I don't think that you can tell a very effective story if it's not a reflection of either your thoughts or your experiences. I mean, you can of course shroud an experience with metaphors, with language, with plot, with narrative, and with characters, but
Mm.
at the end of the day, if you have not felt what it means to get your heart broken by a one night stand, how
Mm.
can you sort of write about it?
Mm. Yeah, you're very right. Actually, I think the best stories come from feelings that you know of. Um,
Yes.
I was
And
thinking. Yes, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
I feel like that feelings and the sort of really that introspection that you do on those feelings,
Mm.
they are what that stands out in a story as well, because of all the stories that I have read in the past 10, 12 years, I feel like that is what stands out, and I feel like that's really what resonates, that introspection that you do at a feeling, is to, okay, if my heart really was broken by a one night stand,
Mm.
then why did it happen? Why do I feel this? What conspired me to feel all of this? And I feel like if you sort of go on and explore that within the story, that is what um, you know uh, you can that could be very effective, or that could of course make or break the story.
Mm. And from what you've mentioned, I think you also had a very introspective childhood. And I wanted to ask, what is something that you would say to the younger Essen or to the child Essen?
I think I'm going to go and tell the child Ahsen that it's going to be all right, and it's um it's going to be, yeah, and it's going to be, it might be a little troublesome right now. It might, you might feel like you're being left out, or you might feel like, you're going through a lonely time, but it's going to be all right. And try not to be really hard on yourself, and like, chill out. I mean, that's that's not something that you should be saying to a 10-year-old. But I feel like if I can go back in time, I will just hold myself and shake myself and tell myself to just chill out.
Mm.
Because things will turn out to be for the better, and things will be very interesting. But I feel like I will tell my younger self to just chill out and just learn to, perhaps develop trust on his abilities from a really young age, because
Yeah.
that would of course save a lot of time to the adult Ahsen Waheed. But
Mm.
then that would really distort the okay, what do you call it, the flow of time. And then things, and if you've read Alfred Hitchcock, no, I don't think you're supposed to read Alfred Hitchcock. I feel like you're supposed to watch Alfred
Was.
Hitchcock.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, but there is another person. What's their name? Anyway, so you know how time and space happens. So, but yeah, I'm sorry for this very unsuccessful joke, but I think that I will go and tell myself to start developing some trust in the in my abilities, and in me, being myself, because I feel like I've struggled a lot with that, and I perhaps still continue to do that today. And at times it feels like that my creative practice is me screaming for my existence, or for me screaming that I also exist here, that
Mm.
I am also here, look at me.
Mm. Yeah. That's quite. It's quite moving. You screaming for to say I exist. Do you
Yeah, but
often?
I also
Yeah.
think that it shouldn't be necessary,
Mm.
because you don't have to scream for, you okay, you might, so why do people scream? Well, they scream for approval, they scream for attention, but you are screaming because you want to be, right?
Mm.
It's such a fundamental right, it is the foundation of everything. And
Mm.
you screaming to be, if you're screaming because you want to be, because you just want to exist, you want to take up space, because you really, well, you are here, I am talking, for example, we are conversing
Mm.
because we exist, and we exist because we exist in time and space, and we really take up physical space. So
Mm.
really screaming for something so foundational and fundamental, I feel like it should not be that case.
Mm.
But sadly, perhaps it is in certain regards. I'm sorry, this conversation is becoming very intense, and actually, this is the kind of conversation that I would have after 9 p.m., preferably at night,
Yeah.
with a Ram Hour playlist playing in the background,
Yeah.
uh, or sitting on my rooftop for that matter, and looking at the stars, and then talking to a friend, and then
Yeah.
crying and telling them, "Oh my God, this is how sad my life is."
No, I think these are the conversations that are also the most important and moving. And what you said, it sort of makes me think, who is someone that you want to scream the loudest at? Scream that I exist. Who is someone that you want to say it the loudest to?
Hmm. I think perhaps my father,
Hmm.
because you know the creative son not having a great relationship with their father is a trope that has
Hmm.
been so overdone in our lives.
Hmm.
But that is what it is. And also I feel like this realization that I'm screaming, um, I had that when I was at a place. I was meeting a few friends, and we were playing chess because I play a lot of chess. So it's usually like an everyday thing where in the evening I would go and meet up my friends and we would play cards or chess or whatever. And there were like 7 or 8 guys sitting in that room, and I was in a corner playing a game of chess. And I just, for a moment, I was thinking where I should move my knight. I just looked up into the room, and there were these 7 people who were sitting there, and they were just sitting there. They had no accolades, they had no achievements or awards, they had no creative practices, as we like to call the doodle making that we all do,
Mm.
and they had none of that, but they were just so comfortable sitting there, lounging there, thinking about what to order, to eat, and someone is looking for a lighter while the other one is holding a cigarette between their lips. And it just made me realize that, why do I have to scream so much? Or why do I have this feeling on the inside to just scream, to be there? Because these 7 guys are also here, and they also take up the space. And because I know all 7 of them, and they live pretty chilled out lives, pretty normal ones, pretty stable ones. And that just made me think, is has it got something to do with my childhood? Has it got something to do with how I see myself?
Mm.
But yes, I think that that was a sort of a very sudden realization. And it at times it does feel like that you are perhaps screaming into the void,
Mm.
because you have this need to scream because you
Mm.
want to take up that space. But even when people are going to give you that recognition, and people are going to send you heart emojis on your posts on Instagram, or even when people do buy your work and hang them in their bedrooms and then send you pictures, you're getting that feedback. But you know even that feedback won't be enough at times,
Mm.
and perhaps at times that will compel you to scream louder. um but yes, I don't, I feel like it's perhaps it's a vicious cycle of sorts.
Mm.
But hey, I mean, you end up making pretty things out of it, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's a win-win situation.
Do you think this is the driving force behind the work of most artists? This need to exist and to have other people acknowledge their existence.
Maybe, and I also think that it is also because they want to create,
Mm.
because perhaps they want to establish that little connection with the creator. Or, I'm not a religious human being, but with that energy that creates us,
Mm.
and that the energy that makes the plant grow and makes a baby poop, like pop out of another body.
Mm.
um, and I feel like that is, and at times I was having a conversation with another writer friend of mine, and he mentioned that perhaps, when you create something, it's a way of the universe experiencing itself through you.
Mm.
So perhaps at the end of the day, you're just a vessel of, for like in classical South Asian metaphors,
Mm.
the human body is a vessel, and the human body is made out of clay. So the vessel is, is a clay vessel,
Mm.
and perhaps that the universe is flowing through that vessel and experiencing itself. So, and I feel like that idea keeps you in check, because, for instance, if you create something, right? If you've spent 4 hours at a piece, and wow, lo and behold, you have created a masterpiece. That was the universe flowing through you and making you feel like a superhuman, and making your work feel like the work of a superhuman. But once you're done, you go and you wash your hands, and you are a human being. You are that vessel again, the vessel that has to eat, the vessel that has to poop, the vessel that has to take a shower, the vessel that will get scolded by their parents, perhaps, the vessel who needs money to sustain itself, the vessel who needs friendships. And I feel like at some level there is this one extreme that, on one hand, I say that it's because I'm screaming out I want to be here, but on another way to look at it is this idea that the universe itself is flowing through and you are just a vessel. And it really, I feel like, humanizes the practice, and it makes you perhaps grateful as well at times when you're in a really good mood, that that you're that you're grateful that the universe today decided to flow through you for 40 minutes or 50 minutes, perhaps 4 hours. But after that, you're just a human being um, is flawed, who is full of errors. And it's just that perhaps they were blessed in those 4 hours, or in those 4 days or 4 weeks.
Mm. You mentioned how when you would be creating stories as a child, you would be drawn to these wise old figures, and I was wondering if you see in your life right now a figure like that you look up to or you're drawn to.
I feel like it's going to be a bit of a vain statement, but I feel like that the person that I look up to a lot is what I could be potentially, right? What would happen if Ahsen Waheed were to read all the books that he should be reading, to do all of the tasks that he should be doing in an year? You know, what would that Ahsen Waheed be like? And that is something that I look up to all the time. And perhaps that is not a super great thing to do, because then you are just, whatever you do in your life, you have such a huge ideal that you will always be feeling like you fall short. You might go to bed and not feel like you've done enough because you haven't gotten closer to that ideal. But I also feel like that. I feel like that's who I look up to currently. But in my life, I have always been really good friends with my instructors and my teachers, because perhaps I was always, that the idea of drawn toward their wisdom, drawn towards what they had to offer. And I feel like that sort of also cultivated um, my intellect a lot, because I would get to talk to them, and they would tell me stories, they would tell me ideas. They would tell me ideas behind the stories and the stories behind the ideas. And then, they would tell me to look up on a particular idea, and then they would give me books. And, having that relationship with with your instructors and your professors and your advisors, I feel like that is something that I used to thrive off of. But now, for the past 1 or 2 years, this toxic ideal, this toxic practice is just sort of something that I look up to.
If there's a person, dead or alive, and you would want to say something to them, who would it be, and what would you say to them?
If I think that I think if there's one dead poet that I would like to. I'm pretty sure you might be aware of Mirza Ghalib, and I would tell him. I would actually thank him. I just wanted to say thank you to him, because there was a point in my life where I was. I would have turned out to be 180-degree to what I am right now, and it was these poets that told me the nuanced approach to life, to emotions, and to human beings. And I feel like I just want to say thank you to that dead poet now, that sleeps in Delhi somewhere. That, thank you so much for your wisdom and for your wisdom truly, because a lot of the times people think that poetry is about, making out and loving someone for their eyes. Well, it is for most part, but there is a lot of wisdom that is hidden between the lines. And I would like to thank Ghalib and all of those, the entire sort of pantheon of classical poets, classical South Asian poets, for really helping me and making me appreciate and understand these nuanced approaches. And I feel like that is also the reason why I don't write in Urdu, because whenever you pick up a pen to write in Urdu, you'd always think that you're up against the likes of Ghalib and Mir and Sauda, and how can you say something when all that is to be said has been said by them much, much better than that could have ever been said.
Would you want to screen something to them?
To them? No, I don't think that I would even raise my voice in front of them, because they were, for me, I think that they know what I'm going through already. So, if I read their work, it feels like they are talking about me, or if they're talking about my complicated and nuanced situation. So I don't think so. I want to scream anything. But I think I want to scream to my society that the current society that is that is being cultivated right now, the way that there is such that there's literally no tolerance. um there's so much hate that we have, and there's so much confusion that we have, and I would really like to scream um to the people that are here that someone like me does also exist, and has every right to be in this society. um because 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 if you're an artist and if you are sensitive and mindful, you are affected by what is going on around you, and the things that are going around us are not that ideal to say the least.
Yeah. Any parting thoughts, Ahsen, in this
um
strange and unfamiliar world?
I don't know. I didn't think that this conversation would be this intense and retrospective.
Yeah.
I thought it was just going to be a little, oh, hey, what do you do? Well, this is what I do. Oh, okay. Well, what colors do you like using in your paintings? Well, this is what I like using in my paintings. Oh, what kind of poetry do you write? I didn't think that this was going to be this intense and this. Um, I hope it was worthwhile.
Of
Uh,
course. Of
these
course it was.
practices, because I mean, matlab, thank you so much for coming to my TED talk. That is something that I would like to say in the end, and of course I'll like to make crack a joke here and there just to um ease it back up, because of course, I mean, like I've said, these are the conversations that you would have at night. And nothing great happens after 2 a.m., as we say. So so these are perhaps the conversations we're having at night. But so yeah, that's my thought, that I was not expecting it to be so meaningful. I hope it was. I mean, this is a really meaningful conversation for me, because now I will keep on thinking about the things that you have asked me. And although all of the replies that I've given to you are really smart ones, right? Because I want you to I want you to think that I'm really smart and very Gandalf-esque. But but I feel like I will be going through them today and just thinking about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll also be thinking a lot about your answers, and I just want to
Yeah.
thank you for, taking out the time and, telling me about the anxieties, the unfamiliar, the familiar, which is home, the loneliness of a creative childhood or a creative mind, and, being a screaming being in the world, someone who screams, I exist. That was quite moving for me. And I think I have a lot to think about after our conversation. And I'm really glad that you trusted me with your thoughts. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Naya. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I hope we get to catch up somewhere, somehow,
Yes.
in this grand cosmic dance that we're all a part of.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. This has been a presentation by House Ltd. I hope you will listen, follow, rate and review all our episodes, which are available free on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, Pocket Casts, and the official House Ltd YouTube channel.